So here is the QB Wizard. That's the application I mentioned previously that allows you to pull and extract chart of accounts from Tigerpaw into QuickBooks. The QB Wizard is going to, or the Tigertrak is going to send the batches over in an automated fashion, and the Ignite utility is going to set your income and cost codes automatically, and we'll go through that. Tantivy is designed for subscribe report delivery and collections. That's going to automate Tigerpaw's crystal reports and is also going to allow for dunning notices to your customers. Let you know if they paid the bill or haven't paid the bill yet. And our company also does training and crystal report writing for Tigerpaw as well. And this is the code on our reportstiger.com site that will allow you to get some money off on some of the canned crystal reports we have out there and our software. And as I was mentioning at this earlier, before we had a little technical snafu there, to batch or not to batch. To me, I always want to go ahead and do the batching. I don't want to go through and key invoices from one system into another, because I mean, you just think of all the possible failures that you're going to have in that system at that point in time, because someone just misses keying one in, key it in wrong. It just becomes a huge disaster potentially. To me, it's just a very foolish endeavor to go ahead and try and key in invoices, because again, you're just going to make a mistake. You've been given a really important gift from Tigerpaw. Again, the straight line processing, you're taking that from a quote to a service order and a related purchase order out to an invoice. But as part of that gift, it requires, it's just not something where you open the box, now Tigerpaw is now integrated in with your QuickBooks. We need to do some steps to get that done, but they're steps that are very well worthwhile. And if I'm testing my accounting integration, I want to make sure I'm taking it to an appropriate party. So if I'm taking anything out to a lab to have my blood tested, have any kind of test done on me, I'll make sure I'm taking it to a lab that looks legit. Same way if you're doing your Tigerpaw. So you want to make sure that you have a qualified personnel in your office go ahead and perform this function. Okay, so that means if you don't want your IT department doing it unless they have accounting skills. If they do, that's awesome. Go ahead and let them work on it. That's fabulous. They're that multifaceted. So again, we call this webinar Testing Your Accounting Integration, and we are putting it under the microscope at this point in time. So we're going to dig deep on what you have and verify what you've done. So as part of that process, we're going to go ahead and we're going to verify our groundwork. General ledger accounts. We may need to create a few first, and where they are done at is inside Tigerpaw, underneath the master tables, and that's going to be Edit Master Tables, Accounting. So these our GL accounts started to be populated, so this is kind of really part 2 of what we've done previously. So you guys should have already have this done, but again, if you are cutting to the end of this to kind of see how the story turns out and what your end game is going to be, you're going to want to come in and get this done. And again, be cognizant that you may need to have those extra general ledger accounts created. So we're going to export that list from the accounting system. And again, it's a good time for you to revisit what you're reporting on inside your accounting system. Or are you just looking at sales and cost of goods sold right now? With Tigerpaw, as we're going to mention later, I can look at things a whole lot more clearly. You're going to want to clear those Apex settings unless applicable, and you're going to import into the archive first and test. And again, I'm going to move to these quickly because this has already been done in several other webinars for Tigerpaw, so we're going to do this as a review. So you're going to verify in the archive and repeat the process in the main. GL codes are required for all line items. There are some potential exceptions that you may have, and that's going to be in the area of special items and labor items. And again, requires accounting knowledge. Clear the Apex settings unless applicable, and enter your defaults underneath the accounting options. And where that means is inside Tigerpaw, we're going to want to come out under Tools, Options. That's why it's a really good way to do this, even going to the master tables, go into the option first. I'm kind of doing things, just here, edit master tables in your head, and just kind of follow those patterns all the time from over the years. So if I come out to my configure accounting, these are your default GL codes that we're talking about. If you haven't set those yet, you're getting ready to do testing, make sure you have those codes, because if you don't have a default in there, that item's not going to go anywhere, or you're going to generate an error for yourself. Okay? So if you don't have those, get them set. If you have questions, certainly feel free to reach out on that. So accounting option talked about, make sure you're selecting the appropriate accounting link, select the appropriate inventory valuation, enable your feeds, and potentially create a non-imported batch for your accounts. And what that means is back in here again where we just were inside the options, we are going to head out, make sure we set the appropriate link. You don't want to use the QuickBooks Pro link, you want to use the QuickBooks Desktop link. Enabling feed means come out and enable your AR feed. Without that, your invoices are not going to flow to the accounting into the batches, so there's no way for us to manually batch them because they're not in the batches to begin with. You can still generate an invoice if that's turned off, but it's not going to go anywhere. The same for your GL feed and the AP feed, and we'll talk about that if you're going to end up going through that route, and choose whether you want to send $0 invoices over to the accounting system or not. Okay? And here is your choice of your costing methods. FIFO, LIFO, standard, and average. So that's something you're going to want to clearly talk to your accountant about. So if you are, again, the IT guy who's in doing this, make sure you speak to your accounting department or your outside CPA and say, hey, what do I need to set there? Because that could have severe ramifications on your profitability for the company. Customer import, and again, this is not really for the accounting integration, but it is something that you want to have done before you even do this. Build list of customers. Include your tax codes and import, export to Excel and Scrub, import into the archive, and verify and archive and repeat process in main. Again, this has been discussed in the other webinars for Tigerpaw that are recorded out there. Sales tax district, the top level tax code should already exist based on your customer import. If you didn't plan properly, then you need to manually put those in the master tables. And we're going to be back in there for another area, so I'm going to show you that in a little later. And tax districts are a component of the rate, e.g. state, county, and special purpose. And remember to include your sales tax vendor. Then Tigerpaw can handle the min-max rates for people. I think Tennessee and several states have the min-max on there in their states to deal with. Do your price book import. But before you do that, make sure you handle your vendors. And remember, you have a vendor ID if you're doing the PO batch. And what that means in the system, and as again, this is as a refresher, someone is a vendor, come out and supply an AP vendor ID. Only need that if you're doing the PO batch. And vendors for products only, we don't need the post office in there. Price book items, you may want to have different types of items being used. You have the option to do a material, special, and labor for your price book items. So there's some considerations there as far as how you're going to set your income and cost codes. And we're going to go through this. That's what I've kind of mentioned this quickly, just as a reminder for yourselves as you're doing this. Make sure you create all these income and cost codes. You need to find a way to use those. And that's part of our testing process. And if you haven't thought of it until then, you're going to very clearly run into that at the testing process. And whether you want to have categories and subcategories in your parts. And then once verified in the archive, do it in the master. Sync your invoice terms. And what that means as far as syncing your invoice terms is inside your QuickBooks. We're going to want to make sure, if I didn't load up my QuickBooks here and get that loaded in advance. Okay, I already had it loaded up. So we're going to come out under Lists, Customer Vendor Profile List, Sales Rep List, Terms List, Payment Method List. So under our payment method list, we want to make sure these match exactly what you have inside Tigerpaw, inside your master tables. Invoice terms, shippers need to match, freight terms need to match, payment types need to match. Okay, so that's what I'm referring to when I'm saying sundry matters, and those items need to be managed. Accounting rep ID inside the rep record. Manual batching versus automated batching, we're going to discuss that as well. And then we're going to deal with an opening inventory count. That's kind of added to purview of this. So we talked about picking that right link. That means picking the QuickBooks desktop link, okay? Automated batch versus the manual batch. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time mentioning the automated batch during this process. That's the product I mentioned to at the top of this that was called Tigertrak. That takes Tigerpaw's batches that are in the system and, as the name says, automates them, sends them over to the accounting system automatically. The difference between the two, and we believe it takes saves about 30 minutes a day. It eliminates the switch to single user mode when you're doing an import. You're going to see that in a little bit. It eliminates dual application of payments. When I'm doing a manual batch of payments It only goes into the accounting system as an open credit. Eliminates credit hold maintenance. We can actually take invoices inside QuickBooks based on the aging and put that whole account on hold inside Tigerpaw. Eliminates the mystery of errors, and we're going to see during our batches we're going to run into some errors. I did this well. I've produced some errors during my process here that we want to take a look at, and we're going to see that our system will eliminate that error. You're going to get a non-descriptor. We're going to tell you exactly why it went bad, and we're going to eliminate vendor bill entry with our PO module. But in the end, both integrations begin at the same point. They just branch off at different points. Meaning on the PO batch, different setup needs to be done as far as our system is concerned, but everything up to that point is similar as you would do with Tigerpaw's PO batch. We believe we improve upon it, and we can actually create the vendor bill, so there's some steps that need to be followed inside our product to do that. And if anyone has any questions in the webinar about that, we can certainly field those as well. Error checking. As I said, we're going to give you an actual diagnostic error as to why something failed. Vendor doesn't exist in the database. Customer does not exist in the database. Error on line 7 RAID. You're going to see a possibility error on line 6, error on line 9 when you're doing the manual import, and that's all you're going to get. With the automated integration, we're going to tell you why it failed. GL account doesn't exist. Sales tax code doesn't exist. The IF file. That's what the manual batch is comprised of. So the manual batch uses that IF file, and that IF file is essentially, as you can see illustrated here, it's just going to break into that database. And you're going to see the ramifications of that in a few minutes. In fact, on a call I was just on a few minutes ago, ran into that same exact scenario with a customer. And I'll explain that as we get to it here. Super important here. You want to make sure that you play in a sandbox. So if you have made a bad integration, you haven't done things correctly, we want to limit that damage. So how can we go ahead and do that? Inside Tigerpaw, in case you've never done this, we're going to come out and we're going to come out under Tools, Accounting, or pardon me, Tools Options, forgive me, Tools Options, and we are going to create an archive database. That's going to give you an exact replica of your Tigerpaw database, and it's going to be a sandbox. I'm not going to need to worry about this database, this demo database, and this database has had more imports than it can stand, so not a big problem on my end. On the QuickBooks end of things, you're going to want to make sure that you have gone ahead and, let me just close this second company out here in my QuickBooks. You're going to want to come out under here and you're going to back up your company, and then you're going to restore it somewhere on your local drive, somewhere on the server, somewhere out of the way where no one else is going to get at that. So now I have a test QuickBooks database and I have a test archive database from Tigerpaw that I can go ahead and play in. Parallel versus non-parallel. I get asked this question very frequently. Is it better to run my Tigerpaw in tandem, and my new Tigerpaw, my new QuickBooks in tandem with my old system that I might have had before Tigerpaw, or is it better just to kind of cut over immediately? Now, to me, I lean in the camp of cutting over, but after you test. You can see below there I say test, 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 and more test. Can't stress that enough. So if I've done enough testing, to me, I very much have mitigated the need to go ahead and do a parallel system, because if I'm doing a parallel system, I had this happen to be previously. I had a customer who was running into issues with their old setup. So now they were spending hours going through setup issues that had nothing to do with the Tigerpaw QuickBooks integration. And again, I'm focusing on the QuickBooks integration here because that's the most frequently used integration that I've run across. That's how we're kind of focusing on that. And to me, it's a very in-depth integration. So that's why we're kind of leaning towards doing that. Okay, so what to test? We want to test customers, the AR batch, the GL batch, and the payment batch, and also the PO batch. So essentially, we want to test everything, every GL code, every tax code, to make sure they work. Again, we're trying to eliminate the need for doing this amount of testing, or eliminate the need for doing parallel processing in the database. The QB Wizard eliminates the need for a lot of that because it's automating the setup of the GL codes. When I have a human error or human factor involved, I have a chance of someone coming out and creating their own GL code. If the QB Wizard is doing that, it's programmed a certain way. It walks you through a wizard process to go ahead and eliminate the need for that. Team approach. Now, to me, I use this as part of my training. So if I am running through invoices in the system as part of my training process, creating service orders, creating purchase orders, creating invoices, let the staff build those different service orders as part of their practice, and then go ahead and use that as the fodder, so to speak, for your accounting integration. So let's go ahead and let's mix up an AR batch. So let's ask ourselves a question, well, how do we even mix up an AR batch? To do batching inside Tigerpaw, we're going to come out of our tools, accounting, configure and create accounting batches. Now this is for the manual batch. So inside here we have our customer batch, we have our AR batch, we have a GL batch. Customers obviously is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be your customers that you have in the database. That's how you get them over to the accounting system. And one important thing you might want to do before you start doing your testing, before you flip the switch, is if you have imported all your customers directly from QuickBooks, or maybe you've keyed accounts in, you may want to come out and do an export batch manually first if the accounts already exist in QuickBooks. There's no reason to send them over a second time. They're already there. You're going to save yourself the effort of doing it. So you come out, you create a batch file, and you're going to come out and go ahead and export that as an IF file, and you are not going to import that in the QuickBooks. You're going to essentially let it die on the vine out there, so to speak, because they're already over in the accounting system. So here is our AR batch. That's going to be your invoices, your customer invoices. GL batch could be a combination of two things, your cost of goods sold and or your purchases, depending on whether or not you're doing the PO batch or not. AR payment batch is going to be your cash receipts from your customers. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory. Where the batch file goes, if you're doing the manual batch, is specified right here. Tigertrak does not utilize this batch file, so we don't care if you have one, but I would set it anyway, quite honestly. Okay, so that's how you do a batch. So let's go through and walk through a little bit of a scenario here for ourselves. So here is going to be our invoice scenario, and this is how I like to script things out in a database for myself. Okay. So I want to come out in advance and kind of give myself some expected results, right? I'm going to add a labor item on here. I'm going to know who the customer is going to be supposed to go to, and I'm going to know what tax code it's supposed to go to, okay? And these are the line items that I'm going to be expecting to see inside my invoice. So now let's go into Tigerpaw, and I have my 1133 group here. Now I've done some previous orders out here, so I'm going to come out and do my first item. So that's the customers on credit hold that gets pushed by our Ignite utility. So I'm going to duplicate this order since I already have some parts on here. I'm going to do it for parts and labor. Okay, so I'm going to come out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have my income and cost codes set. So as part of this, I'm going to first start with these income codes that I have. Now the income codes can be set a few different ways in Tigerpaw, as we mentioned. I can manually come out here and set it, and that's kind of a pretty silly endeavor to do that. So I'm going to set that on every line item and pick it out. I could come out and I could change the codes by price level. If I want to do a price level override back under the master table. So if I was back in the master tables and I came out under inventory and I went into price levels, I could set out here every time I use this price level, use this income and cost code. Okay? The override method would entail me coming out and saying that every time I use a certain item, we're going to come out and we're going to assign an override code for it. I'm going to pick a code, and I'm going to hit the GL code and push it across all the various price levels. In fact, I can see that on another part here that I have called the bad guy part right here. That's what it's going to look like in the end. Okay? Other method to do it is a utility that our company has written that is called Ignite. It allows you to set your income and cost codes based off of the service order type. So simply by me changing the service order type here to a telephony installation, I can change the income and cost codes. If I do technology installation, the codes are going to change. So we're mapping it to your service order type. So if anyone on the call has any questions about that, we're going to mention it later, and you can certainly reach out to me directly with the contact information that you've now seen. And now you can see it again at the end as well. Okay? So again, if anyone in the group has any questions at all, please feel free and reach out and let me know. I'm kind of monitoring the questions here, so I'm just going to take a break if need be when we reach that stopping point. So I have this point out here, this part. I already have a significant amount of inventory, so I'm going to come out and I'm going to fill this part. And I am now going to come out and create an invoice, a complete invoice. That invoice should be closed, so as part of your best practice, I'm going to make sure that that's filled. So here's my invoice. So let's kind of, when I do testing, I kind of do it in one process at a time, okay? So I'm going to come out under Tools, Accounting, configure and create accounting batch, and I'm going to do my AR batch, which is right here. And I'm now going to come out into my QuickBooks, make sure I'm in single user mode. I don't want to switch to multi. I want to be in single user mode, and I want to be in as an administrator. Okay, so I'm going to come under Import, go to my IF file, and all your files are going to be named. If you did have the right link, would say QB AR Enhanced. You're going to hover over it. We can see the date here. Okay, my invoice has been imported successfully according to QuickBooks. So now let's come in and take a look at it. And unfortunately, I already forgot what number it was. So it's 9038. So if I'm in QuickBooks, I want to come out under Edit, and I want to come to Find, and I can look at the customer account as well. And there's other ways to do it. So here's my invoice. So let's go back to our scenario that we had. So we have $1,380, $400, and $100, right? So let's go look at our scenario that we were looking at. $1,380, $400. And I think I may have had a different quantity on there. 20, 30, 40 is the total dollar amount. And I think I changed my scenario. Sorry about that. But let's just take a look at our invoice here. So we'll get to this even a little differently. So I messed my scenario up a little bit, but doesn't mean we don't worry about that end of it so much as looking at the invoice dollar in total inside Tigerpaw. So it's 2,030.40 inside Tigerpaw, 20, 30, 40 in QuickBooks. Now you don't need to go out and do as I did. In fact, I don't even follow my own rules on there, so sorry. So here's our 2,030.40. Dollar amounts match up, right? Our sales tax is $112.80. Sales tax here is a little bit off there. So what code did we end up doing differently here? I have a PO code that was set on here, and I have a Philadelphia code. So there's something wrong in the setting of my tax code. So I have something off in my codes there. So now we want to go back and clearly verify what has happened. So in fact, I'm going to build this exact scenario here, and I have something wrong on my PO code there. And let's find out on that service order what went wrong. So we have a Philadelphia code here, and I have a, so I'm going to build this from scratch. I think I may have something caught in here, so I'm just going to build this one right from scratch. Let's just do a brand new service order for you folks. Sometimes when you, that's a kind of a good lesson. When you're copying items, sometimes you can end up picking, or service orders, you can end up picking up something bad from a previous one and not realize that it's in there. So I'm going to make this $1,000, and we'll come out here. Now I always again like to have a labor item, and I like to have a special. I want to kind of really test every area of the integration. Okay, so I'm going to fill all items here, and I'm going to come out and create a new item, a new invoice. And that should be the appropriate tax for Philadelphia, 8%, and let's make sure that my tax inside this database matches that. So we're going to find our items, and we're going to find our Philadelphia item here, and we're going to find our Philadelphia group down below, and it indeed does say 8%. Okay, so we should be good on that. All right, so let's approve it, and we're going to post. And now we're going to come out and import that into QuickBooks, and hopefully get a result that makes some sense this time. I could dig back and never don't waste your time during the webinar and find out what's going on there. So I was on a session right before this with a customer. I think I was playing around with some of the batches. Okay, so let's come out here. Get this out of my way. Sorry about that. And now let's find our invoice number. So that invoice number was invoice number 9039. And we're having an issue here with our PA tax. So we're picking up a wrong code with the manual batch. So the code is off. Just make sure that the total matches. So that's one of the issues of the manual batch. Sometimes the thing's on foot. So let's come out to our customer and make sure we have a proper total dollar amount. 2323. So you're kind of seeing a little bit of an issue here. We had no issue on the previous one. It's that when you're doing the manual integration, you're not going to get proper footing on the invoices because the tax is kind of jammed in there. But we will have the appropriate dollar amount show. It's just what visibly shows inside QuickBooks. Okay? So if we were to come out here with the quick Tigertrak integration, it actually feeds the appropriate tax code over, but the invoice dollar amount, as you can see, is correct. And if we come out to our sales tax payable, and we'll just do this for today, we should be getting the appropriate tax out here. There's our taxable collect items, and we have our tax collectability. So we have $73.50 for PA, and that should match to one side of that, and we have the rest that's coming out for the second invoice for 9039, so $73.50. Matches our $98 if you add those two up. So it's just a question of what the presentation is. So there was nothing wrong with what we did. It's just a presentation. So that's one of the things you have to watch out for on the manual batch when you do that. Okay? Just a little lesson in there. I even tricked myself up in there. I forgot we were using the manual batch. I'm so used to using your Tigertrak that I don't do the manual batch anymore. So it's a good lesson learned. Now let's take a look also when we're on the invoice in QuickBooks. Is when I come out now, when I go into reports, and when it comes to transaction history, there's no payments, but let's go to the transaction journal. Let's see if our general ledger accounts worked out okay. Looks appropriate for what we have. Here's all of our revenue accounts that we believe we should have hit. Now let's go look at our P&L that we have. So profit and loss. Now again, we're only going to have the revenue in here at this point in time. Let's look at today, and let's look at that invoice that we had. I'm going to delete the other invoice that I have the 9039 or 9038. I want to get this to 9039. So I can find 9038 on there. Okay, I'm going to get this out of the mix here. Just going to only concentrate on this. Okay. So the effect of that invoice is now out of here. So our invoice total was not $1,225. It was $2,225. So what could have gone wrong here? So let's take a look. To me, I want to look at the rest of the system and see what could have happened. So I'm going to look now at the balance sheet. Whoa, look at that. What's the first thing that you guys see there? Something looks a little bit out of place, doesn't it? Now, if you're looking at that, what do you notice? A bank account's been created. And the reason for that was it's an IF file. That account did not exist inside your QuickBooks. So Tigerpaw, this is Tigerpaw fault. Tigerpaw sends the IF file over. QuickBooks says, oh, I have a general ledger account here that I have not seen before. I'm going to create it because it's the IF file, and I have to push this transaction in. So now you end up with revenue being trapped on the balance sheet. And I've had customers who do not pay attention to their balance sheet, and I have seen a couple $100,000 sitting in that general ledger account at times because they just haven't paid attention to their balance sheet. So you guys now think, wow, my integration worked. I saw, wow, invoice came in, no errors. It really didn't work. It didn't work as far as the view was concerned, but the view was fine because that's how the IF files worked. It didn't work because the general ledger account was not correct. So there are things that you need to check on. Okay, so again, we'll ignore that one. I apologize, made my change there. So what do we want to look for on an invoice import? Proper invoice number, invoice total matches, sales tax is correct, sales tax reporting is correct, and we've looked at those things, the profit and loss impact, and the proper general ledger account. So literally map it out like I'm doing, but do a better job than I did in my scenario there. So I apologize. But again, make sure the invoice total matches. Look at the sales tax liability report, essentially verify everything on that invoice, and check that for all of your items. So my question on there was, when is cash not cash? Cash is not cash when it appears on the balance sheet account and it's really a revenue account. And again, remember the IF file. It is going to essentially attack that database, so to speak. I don't mean that in a bad sense, but it's going to force information into that database that wasn't there to begin with. Discount trouble. Trade discount gone wrong. So let's kind of see what happens when you have a trade discount. And hopefully this is a good example this time that I saved. So this one was not a very good one. So here's a discount that we have, and I'm going to duplicate this and do parts and labor. It's not going to come out. I'm going to go ahead and create this item, and you're going to notice that I have a 10% discount here. Okay? So I'm going to come out. I am going to create a new invoice. I'm going to approve it, and I'm going to post. And now I'm going to come out into my QuickBooks, and you guys will be old hat at doing this when we're all done. And again, I come out under the IF file. So if I have a discount code, everything should come in fine. The problem is I can sometimes have a discount code that is not set right in the database. And a discount code needs to be set appropriately. Otherwise, you are going to receive an error. Now I have trade discount wrong here, so let me see if I set that as a default. Again, I copied a service order. So let's come out and just do a brand new one here, it'll be easier. I was building all these scenarios, and I ended up playing with them afterwards. I wanted to see what it would look like if it was bad. And where the default discount is set at is under your default options here, okay? And the bad discount is going to look like this. In fact, if it's waste your time of doing it, I'm just going to come out and show you. We started a little late. I don't want to delay you too much here. So trade discount wrong is going to be this. Trade discount needs to be set the inverse of what an accounting entry is going to be. So ordinarily, our trade discount is going to be a debit to accounts receivable and a debit to sales discounts and a credit to accounts receivable. We want to do the exact inverse of that. So unless I have something hard-coded on here, I should be able to come out into my item and create my labor item. And I'm now going to come out and offer a discount. And I'm going to approve it, create the invoice. Now, sometimes what you can see with the batches at times is that you can have QuickBooks will make some assumptions at time as to what the debit account will be. So sometimes it will fix itself. But I think, in my case, I think I forgot to create the batch. There you go. So that's the error you're going to see with a sales discount. You cannot use more than one AR or AP account in the same transaction. QuickBooks with the import will not allow a debit and a credit to accounts receivable in the same transaction. So what Tigerpaw is going to send over is a negative debit and a negative credit. So it's playing a little bit of trickery with QuickBooks. Works great, but so if you ever see that and your accountant says to you, well, that's not the appropriate discount entry, it was if you did it correctly. Okay, so you're going to keep getting these errors. Remember I mentioned earlier the error on line 7? So this is an error on line 9. Can't record invalid transaction. Okay, again, it's very difficult for you to figure out. And I did do a manual batch. I just proved it to myself right there. I forgot to do it the last time because I had multiple items. I only had one invoice on there otherwise. That was me just talking and not paying attention to what I was doing. Closing trouble. The invoice refuses to say no. So I'm not sure if any of you guys are doing this in your database right now. But it's very possible with your QuickBooks to come out and close your books. And if you're not doing it, I think you should. Now, the one thing you're going to notice with a manual invoice, with an invoice inside Tigerpaw, is that it's not going to honor that date. And I'm just going to prove it to you very quickly here by creating a quick service order. We're just going to call it new month, okay? And for whatever reason, someone's going to make a new month using an old month date. So I'm going to come out, I'm going to create my invoice. And this is important to know anyway, so I also wanted to discuss this. Remember we were looking at your accounting setup earlier? And I mentioned the date, posting date, invoice date. That impacts how things go over to the accounting system. Posting date is obviously the date the invoice is posted in Tigerpaw. Otherwise, it's going to use the invoice date. Now, there's some people out there, and I'm not saying this is a correct thing to do, but some people will do like a maintenance invoice, and they don't post it until the customer pays. So we have an old invoice date out there. And other parties will come out, and this is something that's really wholly proper, well, they'll come out and they'll push an invoice back to a prior month. But maybe the month was already closed by your controller, and they just didn't tell you. So I push this back now to 11/30. And I'm now going to come back in here. And my data has been imported. So my invoice number 9042 is in the system, but it really shouldn't be, folks, because it is of the wrong date. Our Tigertrak application will stop that. It will not let it post. And in fact, I can show you that, but we're getting a little close to your end time here, so let's just keep moving along. Sales tax, vendor name matters in the database. Okay, so now, folks, I'm going to let this carry a little bit long, so if anyone has to leave, please feel free, but if I'm going to let it run a little bit longer because we did start a few minutes late today because of the login issues that we had and also the screen not displaying appropriately. So as long as you guys had the time to hang in, I will gladly hang in until someone cuts us off, until someone takes the room over. So the sales tax vendor, if I come out into the database and I create a new service order again, okay? And we're going to come out, let's do a brand new one. And you can see I always create an order from the existing open orders out there. I want to see if someone has a service call already in place. So I find that's just kind of a little bit side issue external to the training here. So we'll usually go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come out and I am going to put $225 on there. Again, I'm going to change the code. And I think I broke the New Jersey group earlier. I'm going to come out now, I'm going to create an invoice. And I'm going to approve it, post it. And now I'm going to come out and go into my QuickBooks. Come into the AR sale. And I think I forgot to create the batch again. And I did. That's the danger of the manual batch, folks. You start talking like I'm doing, and I've now just brought an invoice in twice. I didn't heed the order because I had the number that already came in. You get that warning, but you're talking, you're shooting your mouth off like I am doing here. You can very easily forget to bring something in or forget that you brought something in. And I'm not doing this on purpose to show. It's just something that can happen with that batch. So now I'm going to get the error. Must supply a vendor name for the sales tax account. So it gives you a very decent error on there, but it will not bring the invoice in. So again, we want to make sure that under the sales tax code that you supply that vendor. Okay? Reigning reps. What that means is inside your Tigerpaw, you have set up reps in the system, but you have not matched their accounting ID inside QuickBooks. So if I come out to Barbara here, go to the admin tab. I want to put their accounting ID in there, and that's simply going to match up in your QuickBooks under list, customer and vendor profile list, sales rep list. Now, depending on the version of QuickBooks you're using, what used to happen, and it's not happening in 2016 here, but I've seen it happen in other versions. If you don't use the name of the rep, and instead you use the initials, even though on the first one with the IF file it's going to create the rep, but on the second import it creates a CD1, then a CD2, CD3, CD4. I had someone who was doing payroll, and they had hundreds of names buried inside here. So eliminate that problem from happening and set the name appropriately for yourself, okay? Contract require a signature but not a GL code. So you could literally do a GL code on a contract, or do a contract and not post a GL code. That invoice would post, but it wouldn't make it into the accounting system. Mixing up a GL batch. The one thing you want to see when you do a GL batch, in fact, we've done some invoices. I'm going to come do one of these now. We should have enough quantity built up in here. So here's our GL batch. Not a lot of costing on there, but let's go take a look at it anyway. Again, same batch. And I'm going to come out to my GL journal, open, and all is wonderful. It came in. I'm going to see now if I go to my profit and loss. Not a lot of cost on there, folks, but there we go. If I just do this for today, got $5 in cost. Well, had a pretty good day. $5 of cost and had some good revenue there. But what happens in here when I try and open this up? Can't drill down. And why you can't drill down is because of this. With the manual batch, the top line is missing. It's a little trick in QuickBooks. If you don't want someone to be able to drill down in the transaction, leave the top line blank. It eliminates the ability to be able to do that drop down or that drill down. With the automated integration, that does not happen. You can actually drill down. So that's, again, another difference between the two. Okay, I'm not trying to pick on the IF integration, but I also at least want to explain to you the differences. That's really can be a huge issue for people at times. Material, labor, and special are different, and you should be aware of this from your setup already. You don't want to use a cost code on a labor item or a special item. And if you can I take that out of its surface value, I can take that offline after the session is done. But the basic reason is the debits and credits. On a special item, what are you going to debit and credit in the system? Because this special item sends over the same cost every time. So what would you debit and credit? You could do a cost of goods sold and credit some kind of a liability account, right? That would make sense. But if you're doing, say, a lift rental, is that standard cost can be the same every time you do that lift rental? Probably not. One little trick you could do would be to do a $1 quantity of standard cost and use the quantity to drive over. Then you could use a cost code and kind of accrue the liability for that lift rental. Okay? If anyone has any questions, we can certainly field those at the end. But time is getting a little short here. I'm trying to cover a lot of material. GL batch receipts are not accounts payable. So when you're doing a purchase in the database, and we're going to do a purchase order real quickly here, hopefully it all goes well. I'll come out. I'm not usually should do this from a service order, folks, so I'm being a little bad here. I'm going to come out, and I'm just going to do a stock order. Now, a stock order you don't need to have from a purchase order, so don't take what I said there as saying you need to do that every time. I'm going to come out and go under gray bar. And let's come out. We'll buy the, bad guy part. Okay? And I'm going to come out, and I'm going to put a quantity. I'm going to buy 10 of these. And I'm going to say it's $100 a piece. And I am going to set a GL receipt code. Now, what can happen with that when you're trying to set a GL receipt code in the database is that you are going to, one, you run the risk of setting that on a special item. So if you need to have a GL receipt code in the database that is designed for material items versus labor items. And the other thing we want to deal with is that you want to have a code that is not set to hit accounts payable. So let me make sure I fix that code before I do. That's why I'm hesitating. Did I break that code yesterday? Okay, that code there is fine. I want to find the broken one that I did. If not, I'm going to go ahead and build the broken code. Okay, let's just break that. Let's break this code. We'll call it bad inventory receipt code. Again, this is where you're building your code. So this is the code that you're going to see a lot of people do. They're going to come out and they are going to try and hit their inventory account, right? And now they come out and they're going to try and credit because, hey, I got to pay a bill to someone. So the logic of what they're doing makes a lot of sense. So we're going to call this bad inventory receipts. And I thought I already created that, so I apologize. And I'm now going to come out to my item, and I'm going to add this item on here. And my GL distribution code is going to be bad. So what you can do is if you are doing the PO batch, you don't want to be doing this because you're going to double dip transactions, okay? And I'm going to mention that in a few seconds. So let's go ahead and receive all this. And I'm now going to come out and I am going to go ahead and create a GL batch because I didn't post my transaction. Sorry about that. And that's something you're going to do in the beginning, especially when you're talking. And I think I turned off my receipt code when I did it. I did. So again, I'm not going to waste time doing that. But bottom line, what's going to happen is you're going to get an error on accounts payable. Since time is pressing, I'm not going to fix my error on there. Time is pressing, so you're going to want to make sure that you do not hit accounts payable. And just one little lesson here, you're not getting actual cost on your inventory. You're getting FIFO, LIFO, average, standard. You're not getting specific identification, okay? GL batch versus PO batch. We are, as I mentioned, the methods are mutually exclusive between the two. So if I have a PO batch turned on, I do not want to be doing the GL batch because they are going to be double dipping at that point in time. So if I have a GL batch, that would go in, then my PO batch will go over. Now the PO batch, if you're going to use it, you want to make sure that you understand what the PO batch actually does, as I said right above here. So you want to make sure that you're dealing with it. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but you want to make sure that you don't have both of them turn on at the same time. I'm going to explain that in 2 slides from now. Messing up a payment batch. It's not cash and bank with QuickBooks. So when you're building your codes inside Tigerpaw, your defaults, you don't want to make sure, or you want to make sure that you're not using cash and bank here, undeposited funds. Is a code that you want to go ahead and use, okay? So if I now come out here, and let's go to one of my previous, let's go to any account we have. So let's do tools accounting. If you can create accounting batch, so that will be how I'm going to batch my payments over, see if I have any in there. I don't have any payments in there, so let's enter one now. So do tools accounting, and we're going to enter payments, and we'll go to our 1133 group, which we're already on. And wow, I got more invoices in there than I realized. These guys owe us a lot of money. So let's get paid on some of it. Let's just say, well, they'll give us $243. So real world example, people owe you $262,000 and they pay you $243. So I come out here now, got to select my payment type, and we'll say it's going to be a check. That applied to the invoice. So now I should have something in my batches, tools accounting, configure and create RF payment batch, and I'm going to create a text file. And I'm now going to create it into my QuickBooks, and I'm going to import that. And again, it's always going to be added enhanced in front of it. What's different about this picture? Not applied against the invoice. So you need to come back in here, find out, and Tigerpaw tells you invoice number 9042, and apply the payment. So imagine a ramification of being a cash basis taxpayer and not applying that payment. The live integration will go ahead and handle that for you. Okay? I'm just checking to see if there's any questions there. I apologize for clicking off of there. So don't look for an application of payment because you're not going to get it with the manual integration. You will get it with the live. Mixing up a PO batch. So we want to know what it does. First, I apologize. I probably below on that slide, a couple back there. But if you're doing a PO inside Tigerpaw, and I come out and I want to do another one here, and we'll say it's an empty purchase order again, new test, and we'll pick a vendor this time. I'm going to come out and we're just going to grab backtrack because it's just faster for me sometimes to do that. Okay? That's where I missed my GL receipt code last time. That's where you will be putting those in, but we don't want to do this in this situation. Okay? What the heck, I'll do it. All right, so what I'm saying out here now is that if I'm trying to do a PO batch and I haven't received anything yet, or I've done a partial receipt, let's do more items on there than that. So I'm going to say there's going to be 4. And let's go back and actually do a receipt of one of those items, okay? I'm going to post that receipt. We'll be good guys and post it. Now, I had the PO batch turned on in the system. So I said, I got to come out, I'm going to do the PO batch. Now, it doesn't make it into the batch until you add it to the AP batch. It's telling me here, purchase order is not complete. Post all receipts and cancel all unposted receipts. So it could do that if I wanted to. But if I'm coming to the end of the week, end of the month, end of the quarter, I want to get my books closed for that week, that month, that quarter, I can't do that because the inventory is trapped inside Tigerpaw. Okay? So I would end up having, if I created this batch, which we're going to do, I'd end up having an imbalance in my system between the two. Okay? Because I'd be dipping on my PO batch and I'd be dipping onto the other. Now, if I now come out and post this transaction in the end, now at this point in time, I now can come out and go ahead and add it to the AP batch. Okay? But not until then. I come in, it's going to come in as a purchase order, and it's just going to have one line item on there that just says receipt. Okay? Full receipt required. So again, you box yourself in when you go through that method, and how can you close a month when you can't get the transactions in? So what we're looking for is our link. We want to have something that is sustainable, comparable, creditable, and verifiable. So when you're building that link, you want to make sure you can continue to maintain that. So how do I know? The biggest problem you're going to have with that is the GL codes, and that utility I showed you previously is the Ignite utility, and what it does is it allows you to set your income and cost codes based off of your service order type. So if I have a telephony installation and I'm going to add a material item to that, it automatically sets the income and cost codes for me. If I change that to a technology installation, it gives me different codes. So once I'm inside Tigerpaw, I've locked down the codes. I can do that by service order or do it by category and subcategory. So the messages are mutually exclusive, but they're very useful. That's the only way to, in my book, unless you're super careful, to make sure you're hitting the right general ledger accounts. So to me, either you do an override or you do an Ignite, but you want to lock those GL codes down. And our company also has a report that we write. It's called the Accounting Closing Report. That gives you an idea. Let me look under our Tigertrak Custom and come to Accounting. And the Accounting Closing Report. It's a report that's available out on our website, under that reportstiger.com site. And what it does is it actually looks at the general ledger accounts inside your Tigerpaw, and you can compare them to what happens in your QuickBooks. So now if Tigerpaw says a certain number should have hit your general ledger account and your QuickBooks doesn't say that, well, very possibly someone did an import, got an error, and then just didn't follow up on it. So now that could be $1,000, $1, $1 million, $10,000, any number in between those numbers. So this report also gives you a breakdown of everything that happened that day. It gives you the ability to drill down by those GL account numbers, shows me unbatched receipts that might have happened, and inventory valuation. So that's called the Accounting Closing Report. Not required, but it's something that's a really helpful tool. So realize the tool that you folks own right now. So some people run that risk and they go into a very, very basic accounting setup. They do income or sales and cost of goods sold only. Not something that I want to have set up in my database. I want to be detailed. I mean, Tigerpaw can give me so much more. So if I'm looking at my QuickBooks database, I can get my profit and loss statement and look at it this fiscal year to date and now break this out by class. Look how detailed that is. I can see by each division what my profitability is. What's my income for cable materials? What's my cost of goods sold for cable materials? And actually see what I'm making, see the proper margin for my materials. So you guys have been given an awesome tool. You guys have purchased an awesome tool or given it by management. Use it for what it can do for you. And that means doing departmental accounting, as we just alluded to. And we're all talking about convergence all the time. We're all, becoming AV companies, becoming telephony companies, becoming security companies. That means looking at things based on the type of work that you're doing. It means looking at things in a classified approach and based on the type of work that you're doing, just like you saw inside my profit and loss statement. And I have a whole additional webinar based off of this that you can go through. So the proof was revealed, making things more accurate for you, and it is our Tigertrak application. I'll just give you a quick 3 slides on this. 3 key reasons why you would want to use Tigertrak is the speed, it is the accuracy of it, and it is the diagnostic ability that you're going to get. Okay? Time versus investment. The average bookkeeper is making about $19.23 an hour based on some websites we've investigated, excluding fringes, so health insurance. We both know how expensive that is. So imagine the time that's being wasted. We believe we saved you about 30 minutes a day by going to Tigertrak. Stops you from having being in single user mode. Eliminates the double application of payments. Eliminates the credit hold function that you have to, it's actually going to put it, not eliminates, but actually enhance it. You guys can look at your QuickBooks and put accounts on credit hold and Tigerpaw based off of that. Eliminates that error messages. We'll tell you exactly why a transaction has an error. It eliminates that purchase liability account and eliminates vendor bill entry, because as you do your purchase order receipts, we create vendor bills inside QuickBooks. More than just batch automation. Eliminates multi-user access. Gives me error correction. Does vendor export, which a manual batch does not. Allows me to have multiple inventory accounts. Cash application. Credit hold. Use of items, so we can actually send QuickBooks items over, which the manual integration does not do. Vendor bill. And timesheet integration. So we can actually send time logs from Tigerpaw over into QuickBooks as timesheet items. So I'm going to pause here now and actually let the rest of the slide go through here, see if we have any questions at all. So I'm just going to hang in there. If you do have any questions, I'm going to give you my contact information here in a second. If something does pop up in your heads afterwards, we can certainly add that in. Or feel free to call that question into me. Just kind of check and see if we have any questions on monitoring. Again, this is my contact information, so if we have any of those questions down the line, of course, sorry, let that roll through. Sorry about that. Keep clicking out of it. We can certainly respond to those. Love to hear feedback after the sessions, and if you folks are watching this and recorded, that same rule goes away. Now, the code on our conference code, that TCON code, will probably be expired possibly by the time someone watches that. If you watch it 6 months from now, but reach out to us. We might be able to work something out with you, okay? So does anyone have any questions at all? Okay. How do we get the cost of the automatic integration? You're going to want to reach out to your sales rep for that. So whoever your rep is at Tigerpaw, they can certainly handle that for you. And if you're going to, I can actually, I'll grab your information off that. I grab your name, and I'll see if I can also reach out as well and let them call you. So you jot your information down there. But again, feel free to reach out to your sales rep for anyone else whose information didn't ask that question, who's on the call, and they will let you know about the integration. And there's a video we did as well for Tigerpaw. It's also out on YouTube, and I think it's on Vimeo as well, pertaining to just solely related to that integration. If you want to reach out directly to me, feel free. You have my contact information. I can certainly walk you through a quick demo of that. The purpose of this wasn't to do a webinar or a demo of how Tigertrak works, but certainly feel free to reach out. I would gladly give you a one-on-one demo for a handful of you guys or a group you want to get together. I can certainly do it that way for you as well. Okay? Are there any other questions that anyone has? Okay, someone's asking, I don't see anything other than the plain white page with testing Tigerpaw integration screen. Okay, that was the earlier one there. So we had that. That was when we had the issue up front there. So that was resolved. So does anyone else have any questions on the call? Okay, with that, I'm going to call an end to this. I apologize for the little technical miscue in the front there. I'm not sure what happened, but worst case, you heard a couple slides over again, and maybe it would be more interesting the second time around. I don't know. So thank you so much for attending. I know you have a lot of other things you need to do, in your day. So thank you so much for attending the webinar, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions to either me or to your Tigerpaw sales rep or to Tigerpaw support. Always happy to help anyone who needs help. Okay, so thank you so much, folks. You have a wonderful day.